Mr. Speaker, most working families in Singapore today are doing two jobs, one that pays and one that cares. And that is the hidden reality of modern Singapore. A young couple begins with infant care, then child care, then a parent develops dementia, then a spouse needs help after surgery, then a child has special needs. Caregiving is not a single chapter in life, it is a cycle. And holding that cycle together are more than 300,000 migrant domestic workers in Singapore today, up from about 250,000 just 5 years ago. They are not an add-on to our economy, they are the invisible workforce behind our workforce. When they function well, families work. When they fail, families can fall. That is why MDWs are not just a label issue, they are a critical backbone of Singapore's care economy. Mr. Speaker, Singapore's care burden is growing, and it is growing fast. In 2024, Singapore had 1.46 million households, and 27 had at least one resident aged 65 and above. Behind that statistics are real people. In my Punggol constituency, I met a mother in her early 40s. She had 2 young children, and she came to see me as there was an issue with processing her MDW's entry into Singapore. She shared that her father had just been diagnosed with early dementia. Her husband worked shifts, and she told me quietly, "Without my helper, I will have to resign. There is no other way. Please help me." This is the reality for thousands of Singaporeans. If we want women to stay in the workforce, if we want families to remain financially stable, and if we want our seniors to age with dignity, then we must get home caregiving right. Mr. Speaker, care works only when relationships work. Care does not fail because families do not care. It fails because relationships break down. When employers and MDWs understand each other, seniors are safer, children are calmer, families are stable, and workers are treated with dignity. But when communication fails, when expectations are unclear, when skills are missing, that's when things unravel and plans fall apart. Indeed, I believe that our Singapore employers intrinsically care about their helpers, or aunties, as we affectionately call our MDWs. A few seasons ago, the NTUC started on a series of Meet the Members sessions, our Labour version of the regular MPS sessions that MPs conduct. Members could speak with us on grievances in the workplace, unfairness, harassment issues. I had prepared myself on fronting these thorny issues, but I was surprised in the weeks that I was the attending Labour MP, the majority of our members who came to see me were MDW employers, sharing with me the issues that they had with their helpers. Perhaps it was because I'm the only female LMP. The sharing was passionate, but the issues was common across all who came. I was impressed and heartwarmed, and indeed inspired by how the sharing was not focused on complaints of MDW behaviours and strained relations, but on how the labour movement could give practical tips and know-how on managing and improving MDW and employer relations. It's been a while now, but I recall how Madam E, not her real name, a lady in her 50s, told me that after years of hiring helpers in their late 40s, married with children, she was now the employer of a helper in her early 20s, single and carefree. And she had cheerfully quipped that she realized, in the same way that her children are called strawberries, that there's also now a generation of strawberry helpers. And in her careful observations, there are many differences in working well with the many different generations of helpers. And the difference shows in everyday practices. For example, the use of handphones, personal spaces, sleeping hours, and indeed the use of social media. Madam E wanted to hear from our session best practices, tips, and cultural norms so that she can better navigate and manage her relations with her affectionately nicknamed Strawberry Helper. Madam E was not the only member who approached the session with this intent. In fact, the majority of the members who came to see me were like Madam E. And this inspired the NTUC Women and Family Unit to evolve these clinics and sessions into a series of highly attended events called Powwow. Power of Women, wow. These sessions brought employers together with their MDWs to better access resources and strengthen relations. Indeed, during these sessions, our partners also organized an award ceremony for exemplary employer and MDW pairs, some working together for more than half their lives. These events are very well attended and our partnerships well covered from NGOs like the Center for Domestic Employees, trade associations like the Association for Employment Agencies Singapore, to government departments like the Ministry of Manpower, to private firms like Singtel and DBS. These events demonstrate the openness and desire of Singapore families and their helpers to strengthen their relationships, and the many parties coming forward to offer resources to co-create possibilities, safe spaces, and ecosystems for MDW-employer relations to flourish. Mr. Speaker, what families really need is not just rules. They need certainty that care and trust will hold. The need for care is ever-growing, the will for better partnerships is strong, and vast resources are available. I believe we can organize better to strengthen support and dignity for migrant domestic workers and our Singapore families, and this is what my proposals today are about. First, train MDWs for real caregiving. Care today is not just only about housekeeping, it is about dementia care, post-hospital recovery, disability support, child development, senior well-being, yet many MDWs still arrive trained mainly for chores. And this is why my first ask is this. The Caregivers Training Grant has provided excellent support for families with elder care needs by affordably training helpers to take on caregiving duties. My ask is to expand the Caregivers Training Grant to include advanced home care as well as language training, particularly in Mandarin, Malay, Hokkien, Cantonese, and other dialects which are useful for elder care. Currently, the NTUC Center for Domestic Employees have partnered with the Singapore Hokkien Hui Guan Cultural Academy and the Salvation Army to run conversational Hokkien and Cantonese classes for MDWs. This has been helpful in building strong bridges between our MDWs and their families, because when an MDW cannot understand a senior, care becomes unsafe. Language is not just a nice to have, it is actually a safety issue. If a grandma in her 80s cannot tell her caregiver that she's in pain, we will have all failed her in her care needs. Second, professionalized employment agencies. Mr. Speaker, I would argue that too many placements fail not because families are cruel, but because they were badly matched. In my MPS sessions, I've met many first-time employers who did not even know where to seek help when their MDW plans fail. They relied on their employment agency, and many got it wrong. Take Miss T, not her real name, for example. She came to see me as she was in a bind. She could not get along with her helper, and the language barrier caused deep rifts in everyday handling of chores. She had a young child and was worried about her child's safety, as her helper had different standards when it came to safety and care. She sought the help of her employment agent, but was told that there were no replacement available, and she insisted on having the agent take back the helper. She would need to pay an extra fee. This was not in the contract that she signed, and she was actually covered for one free replacement. Not wanting to pay the additional fee, she forced herself to continue with the helper. In the end, they both got into a physical fight. It ended up being a viral clip, traumatizing both my resident and her family, and indeed the helper. This was not a good outcome for all involved, and I felt that the employment agency could have stepped in to play a larger role in mitigating. Luckily, with an appeal, our friends from the Association for Employment Agencies Singapore stepped in and helped both the helper and my resident out of this situation. A good, responsible employment agency makes all the difference. So my second ask is this. Raise professional standards for employment agencies, especially in handling complex care households. This is for families with frail seniors, special needs children, or medical needs. Matching can be done by trained care assessors, not sales staff. A wrong match does not just only cost money, it can break a family and deeply hurt our workers. I propose enhanced training and accredited pathways for EAs focused on caregiving assessment, counseling skills, and individual agents to empower trade associations to reward and recognize agencies that demonstrate lower transfer rates and better post-placement outcomes, and create a stronger feedback loop between families, MDWs, EAs, as well as government agencies. Third, give MDWs affordable primary health care. Mr. Speaker, our MDWs are frontline caregivers. They lift our parents, they bathe our seniors, they manage medications, and yet their own care can remain inadequately covered, especially if their employers are less resourced. So my third ask is this: to extend a primary care plan type scheme to our MDWs. Our primary care plan for migrant workers could be a model worth studying, as they afford primary health care for workers with low co-payments. MDWs today are not covered under the PCP, and their mandatory insurance does not include outpatient care, which means employers and MDWs face high out-of-pocket costs for doctor visits. This could encourage early care seeking and can worsen health outcomes. And could the government then consider a similar outpatient primary care scheme for MDWs? Even a modest co-payment structure for routine outpatient visits could prevent small ailments from becoming serious, thereby protecting worker welfare and reducing family anxieties. Similarly, the current basic insurance of $60,000 annual limit for hospitalization of an MDW might not cover more severe cases, leaving our employers responsible for the excess and payment. Mr. and Mrs. T first came to see me at my MPS looking both concerned and actually a little guilty. They shared that they were thinking of sending back their helper who has been with them for over 20 years. She has almost become family, but as she was struck with cancer and required surgery and treatment, Mr. and Mrs. T, as retirees, were unable to afford the out-of-pocket expenses for this. With their appeals for subsidized medical fees rejected, the family had to send their helper home, feeling guilty that they could have made a difference since the cancer was caught early. Ms. Dabdil's experience caused her to fall into some financial duress. Her helper was with her for only 1 year when she suddenly developed a fever and body aches. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low, and Ms. W had to rush her to the hospital. After several rounds of checks, her helper's condition remained undiagnosable, and finally she was certified unfit to work and was sent back to her home country. This entire episode caused Ms. W to go past her insurance thresholds, and with the 25% co-payment, she had to pay a high 5-digit sum out of pocket. As such, would the Ministry of Manpower consider getting employment agencies to be clearer on their advisories to employers on the medical and hospitalization responsibilities for their helpers? As healthcare costs increase in Singapore too, to mandate timely reviews of insurance coverage and co-payment levels so that our Singapore families are adequately supported when their helpers need medical and hospitalization care. Healthy caregivers mean stable families, and we need to refocus mental health into our system. Unlike regular employees, many MDWs live relatively isolated lives, have no colleagues in the workplace, and while living with families and their employers, they are separated hundreds of miles from their own family. Some are caring for sick parents back home via proxies and monthly transfers home, while caring for ours here. I welcome ground-up initiatives like the Association for Employment Agencies Singapore partnering with the Rice Company to provide recreation and social integration activities, and NTUC CDE interviewing first-time MDWs within their first 6 months. These programs and safety nets, social clubs, craft workshops, excursions, counseling help build community and resilience. So my fourth ask is to make mental health screening and counseling part of a national MDW support framework should the need arise, and to provide resources to scale up such social and recreational activities. To close the circle, our Singaporean families must also be encouraged to be stakeholders in this, as the care ecosystem can only be complete with our families as participants and beneficiaries alike. Fifth, create regulated part-time care pathways. Mr. Speaker, our households are diverse. Some families need part-time support, others need specialized or backup assistance. Some need backup support beyond the traditional live-in arrangement, and yet others guard privacy above everything else, preferring a few hours of help for just a few days in a week. The current ecosystem leans very heavily on the live-in helper model, which works well for many, but not for all. So my fifth ask is to develop regulated, care-focused, part-time MDWs and home care pathways. Flexibility must not mean exploitation. Protection must not mean rigidity. We need both. Building on schemes like the Household Services Scheme, could we pilot care-focused extensions, part-time carers who are properly trained and fairly contracted, or pooling arrangements where several families can share a trained worker on a regulated basis? Such models could serve our working parents, those with intermittent caregiving needs, and families who cannot yet or require full-time live-in help. 6, levies. Let's fix our levy rules for real caregiving burdens. Today, levy concessions are based largely on age as well as for people with disabilities, but care is not just about that. Caregiver burden is heavier when a family's needs are complex. Residents have asked about levy concessions and targeted financial support related to hiring an MDW. Consider single moms or dads with special needs kids who are also caring for their senior parents. Consider families where both parents work full-time to make ends meet. Currently, the $60 concessionary levy is available for households with a child below 16 years old or adult above 67. And there are gaps in the current levy framework. So my final ask is this. Review levy and subsidy eligibility to reflect real dependency, not just age. This should include supervision-intensive but non-ADL cases such as early dementia, as well as youth above 16, frail adults aged 60 to 66, moderate dependency cases, and families with multiple dependents that require care support. Because, really, being a single mother caring for a disabled teen and an elderly parent must feel supported as she loves and cares for her family. Mr. Speaker, our MDWs are not a side story. If we want Singapore to remain strong in an aging world, we must invest in the people who keep our homes running. By strengthening training and communication, uplifting employment agencies, improving healthcare coverage, exploring flexible care models, and refining support for families with heavier caregiving burdens, we can build a caregiving ecosystem that is fair, resilient, and sustainable for both Singaporean families and the MDWs who support them. I thank the House, and I look forward to the Manpower Ministry's reply. Thank you.
SBS Sean Huang.